Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for the Small Cap Insights podcast powered by Darrow Associates. My name is Jack Greenberg. I'll be your host for today. We are a leading full service investor relations firm focused primarily on micro and small cap equities. Joining us today is Michael Wetherington, a managing director here at Darrow. Michael, welcome to the show. It's great to have you. Of
Thanks for having me.
course. So first off, let's start with a little bit about your career. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your work experience, kind of what brings you to investor relations and what you can bring to Darrow?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been in capital markets for over 30 years now. The majority of that time has been in asset management, working on equity portfolios. And in that time, I've covering dozens of industries with, thousands of different companies that technically been under my coverage. And I've probably deeply analyzed and built models and talked to management on, well over 100 companies and, actually have had active large positions in probably 60, 70 of those companies over time. And I've spent thousands of hours, talking to sell side analysts, investor relations personnel, as well as senior management, really, getting better understanding of each of the industries that I covered, the companies, and the business models. So I really love learning about new companies, and that's what was my favorite part of working in asset management, and really figuring out what the business model was like, figuring out how they were like other companies, and and how they were different, and really kind of searching for really the great part of the company and also potential weaknesses. And so, and ultimately what I looked for was, one or two factors that I felt like the market was mispricing, and that would work on both the positive side and the negative side. If a company was um, liked by the street, and I would just really look to see what were they missing in terms of where weaknesses are, and if it was undervalued, why was that being overestimated? So ultimately, I think that's what I bring to investor relations is and to my clients is a deep understanding of what investors are really looking for when they're looking at companies.
Got it. And you mentioned a lot of experience with a lot of different companies over your career. Can you give us an example of a client you're working with now and kind of what makes them unique and how you sell them to prospective investors?
Sure, yeah. So one of the more interesting companies that I've really ever worked with, period, both on the asset management side and on the investor relations consulting side, is a company I'm currently working with now called Beneficient. BENFT is their ticker symbol, and this is a company that provides liquidity in a secondary market for alternative assets like hedge funds, private equity funds, and the like. And as you may or may not know, there's no established market, secondary market for these assets. They are kind of buy and hold, and they're very illiquid. Um, and so versus equity or currency or debt instruments, there's just not a robust secondary market. But there are times when investors really need to be able to liquidate some of their assets. And so this company has come along and they have built a platform where they could produce a quote in a matter of minutes, and they have, everything is online. You can fill out all the paperwork. They will do the custody of the assets for you. And in the event you want to trade those assets, they can affect that transaction in a period of as little as 2 weeks, where, heretofore, um, getting liquidity, if you could find it, would be a very expensive and take a number of months, 6 months or more, to actually be able to negotiate that transaction. So, they're really on the forefront there. They've got a unique regulatory structure, and a patent protected platform that they developed from the ground up to really take advantage of what is a growing market. Alternative assets are growing faster than equity and debt markets, and it's really becoming a high value market.
Yeah, that's great. So, in investor relations, we wear a lot of hats, as I'm sure you're aware. What in your opinion is kind of the most important aspect of our jobs as consultants?
Yeah, well, I would say investor relations is part art and part science. The science part is the straightforward responsibilities of the job. The core competencies, if you will, of IR management, which is, like compliance, for example. Um, but the art part is more of being able to sell the story to investors, which I feel is the most critical part of our job, and also the most difficult. The best way that you do this, I believe, is you make the complex simple and the mundane exciting. What do I mean by that? Well, if investment, excuse me, if an investment thesis is too complex and takes too long to explain, you're going to lose the investor. So you really need to be able to be succinct in the way you describe the company. And if you can, get the investor to really understand the strategy, that's kind of half the battle. The other half is to really kind of get them excited about it. Now you can tell the story and where you would suggest that perhaps we're going to be able to generate significant free cash flow. Now that's a positive quality, but it can be a little bit mundane. What you really need to do to get them excited about that is explain the opportunities that that incremental cash flow is going to bring in terms of, being able to buy in stock, acquire assets, or grow the capital stock to grow the business. So that's really the art part of investor relations, and I really think is the crux of what we do.
Yeah, I agree, and that kind of ties into my next question. How do you think investor relations helps companies kind of navigate these periods of volatility or uncertainty?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think ultimately we're successful as IR representatives when we can actually match our company with the right kind of investor. And if you're able to find long-term investors that have a strategy that's congruent with the company's profile, that'll ultimately bring stability. Um, you know, when you're all going through tough times and whether or not it's a bad news hits, an exogenous event, or you're just having a bumpy earnings quarter. So having these investors as partners is really key to having long-term viability in maintaining valuation. Additionally, as a firm, um, we're able to leverage the combined experience of all the associates. Ultimately, no one associate is going to have seen every situation, but having the group of us that we can rely on other people who maybe have, encountered a situation, perhaps a devastating fire at a key production facility, and how you navigate that. So that's really, I think, where the value is when you get a firm like Darrow Associates.
Yeah. And so final question here, how do you view kind of the appetite in today's market for micro and small cap stocks? Do you think there's kind of more demand for smaller companies from institutional and retail investors?
Yeah, it the value, the demand in the small and micro cap is, does fluctuate. But I think it will continue to grow on a relative basis. And obviously small and micro cap stocks are, more volatile and riskier than large cap stocks. However, over time, and you can look at this, they enjoy longer periods of outperformance and higher level of outperformance than when they underperform. Those durations are typically shorter, and the underperformance is typically smaller than the times when they do outperform. Additionally, one of the things that we've seen over the last 2 decades plus, I would say, is the trend towards indexing. And we've reached an inflection point in there, in that large cap domestic stocks, from an institutional standpoint, greater than 50% of those are held in index funds or passive funds relative to actively managed funds. I think that's something that has been really driving the recent outperformance of large caps versus small and micro cap stocks. And I think, that's probably going to start waning at this point, as they're starting to reach a more fuller percentage. And I think active management will start to outperform. And I think small caps and micro caps will start to outperform as well. And that's really where you need a good investor relations team and to be able to tell a good story. Because honestly, if somebody's managing an index portfolio, they really don't care what the story is. They just care what your weighting is in the market. And it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy as more money has flowed into the passive funds, the stronger the larger caps have become. So I think we're probably at an inflection point in terms of fund flows there. And so I think the appetite going forward for small and micro will continue to increase. And the need to really be able to get out there and sell that story is very critical at this juncture.
I agree, and great answer is really insightful. And Michael, appreciate you kind of taking the time out of your day to be on the Small Cap Insights podcast. If you guys enjoyed today's conversation, please visit our website at www.darrowir.com for more information. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks again, Michael.
Thank you.